Okay, so first things first, just a quick apology if the sound of the heater in the background is too loud. I'm once again working in my regular recording studio because having moved into my art studio yesterday, I discovered that even with things supposedly put out of reach, it was just all far too exciting and tempting for a little 5-month-old Chihuahua pup. So we're back in my slightly colder recording studio area, and I've bought them a little space heater to keep them warm while I'm working. This, of course, is in addition to their little heated mats that are inside their doggy beds, but they're Chihuahuas, what can you do? Now, following on from my reviews of the interviews with the flatmates, I wanted to go back over the interviews with Yolanda and Stephanie and Juan. I'm going to do each of them as separate videos, even though they're kind of short interviews. So in this one, I want to have a look again at the interview with Yolanda and just discuss that one a little bit. Now, just a quick note, I am still putting out at least one video a day. I will be also trying to get a few more videos out with regards to Lily and Jack. There's a few things that stand out to me that I want to discuss. So I've become aware that some people aren't getting notifications at the moment. So just double check that you are still subscribed, double check that you've got your notifications on, and otherwise, if you've not seen a video from me, it's worth going to my channel page and just double checking, just in case there is one that you haven't been notified of. Now, let's go back to Yolanda. So, with a bit of help from some of my wonderful translators, one of the things that came out in listening to Angelica's interview was that Yolanda definitely knew about the sleeping arrangements. Not only that she had repeatedly conveyed her dislike of those arrangements to Jenn, another family member who basically knew about the sleeping arrangements, didn't approve of the sleeping arrangements, didn't even like Stearns, and still did nothing. So, with that in mind, I want to go back over this interview with Yolanda and just see what we can learn from taking another look at it. So, on that note, let's just jump in.
Tuesday, February 27, 13:11 hours, Detective Hunt for OCSO case 24-011313. Can you state your full name? And what's your relationship? And so, do you recall the last time you spoke?
That was Sunday. I celebrate her. Yes.
And is that the last time you saw her
That's
too?
the last time I saw her.
Got it. And so I won't keep you too long, but it's my understanding that it's not uncommon from school to here sometimes.
She did it like a few times.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is that normally like when she's waiting for pick her up or?
Yeah. Sometimes to the office and pick her up.
Mhm.
She walks from school to here.
Okay.
She did it like maybe 5-6 times.
Okay. So just a few times she's done
Just a
that.
few times.
So that's why Jennifer would have come here yesterday to see if she had maybe
Yes, maybe she
come
walked
here.
here. Yeah.
Okay.
So, I feel that Detective Hunt is perhaps a little bit green because he's asked Yolanda, when was the last time you saw Maddie? And she said, well, I had a party for her on Sunday, so it was Sunday night that I last saw her. I would have liked to have heard here her observation of Maddie's demeanour on the Sunday night. And given that this was the 27th, Maddie was still missing. So I would have actually thought it to be a fairly important question to ask, especially because later on he does ask about incidences of Maddie possibly running away. So a little bit frustrating there. And I've said this before, but it is something that frustrates me. When you are looking at a case like this, it's frustrating when you have interviews that have been done by one detective without a backup. Because obviously they're trying to pay attention to what's going on in the interview, they're trying to think of follow-up questions, and they're trying to make notes. So the problem there is that you miss follow-up questions, and also the reports tend to be somewhat lacking. So I actually went and had a look at Detective Hunt's report, and that's something that I will upload to Patreon after I finish this video, because I don't think I've uploaded it yet. But it is definitely somewhat light on. The reason I went to have a look was there was one portion just there where I think she was saying that there have been occasions when Jenn will come to the office and pick her up, as in pick Maddie up, and Maddie walks from school to here to the office. But of course, because the first part of the sentence is redacted, I don't want to be making assumptions, because it's also possible that Yolanda could be referring to someone from her office going and picking her up. So, I sometimes go from the office and pick her up. Most likely, I'm going to presume that it is that Jennifer, will come to the office and pick her up, because it is redacted. But it would have been nice to have seen it written in a report. Now, he asks her, is it not uncommon for Maddie to walk from school to here? And her response is, it's happened a few times, 5 or 6 times, and he confirms that, so, a few times. And again, frustration in his report, he basically says it's normal for Maddie to walk to Yolanda's. Now, to me, 5 or 6 times is not normal. Particularly, and it definitely is only a few times, particularly given that this is February and your school year begins in, is it August or September? I get confused because in Australia the school year begins at the end of January and ends just before Christmas. But either way, it's well into the school year. We're not at the beginning of the school year. This isn't Australia. This isn't like week 4. This is America, where the year's probably more than half over. So 5 or 6 times is actually very, very little. You couldn't even equate that to once a week. So it is not common, or it was not common for Maddie to be picked up from Yolanda's. Now, you could argue that, well, maybe Jenn thought because Maddie had been at Yolanda's the previous week, that's why she thought that she was headed to Yolanda's and being picked up. But it just doesn't make sense. Jenn says, maybe I forgot to tell her that I was picking her up. But the thing is here, if it wasn't a common occurrence for Maddie to head to Yolanda's, and the common occurrence, the regular thing, was in fact for Jenn to pick Maddie up from the school, I would expect the opposite to be the case. In terms of Maddie ends up standing outside the school for half an hour waiting for Jenn to pick her up because Jenn forgot to tell her to go to Yolanda's. Maddie's not going to presume that she's going to Yolanda's just randomly out of the blue, even if she was staying at Yolanda's the week before. It's not like, unless she had been told, you're going to stay at Yolanda's again tonight, it's not like she's going to just think, oh, well, it must be my routine now to walk to my grandmother's place. So, you know, it's BS from Jenn saying that she just presumed that Maddie must have headed to Yolanda's. No, it was just one big excuse because she did not want to sit outside the school and have someone approach her and talk to her, because that would have meant that the search for Maddie would have started way too soon. The notifications would have gone out way too soon. So we have the excuse of buying time. I'm sure that's all it was. She didn't for 1 minute think that there was a possibility that, oh, Maddie might have gone to Yolanda's because I forgot to tell her I was going to pick her up. Because it wasn't commonplace for Maddie to go to Yolanda's. Maddie would have had to have been told, you are headed to Yolanda's after school today, for her to actually choose to do that. Especially given that this is a child who suffers from anxiety. So I would imagine that she actually would have confirmed things the day before. She saw Yolanda on Sunday night. I'd imagine when she left, it was probably a case of, I'll see you on such and such a day. Or if she was uncertain, she would have asked. When you suffer with anxiety, you have to know these things. Maddie wouldn't have just let things fall as they fall. She would have needed to know. So even if Jenn had supposedly forgotten to tell her that she was picking her up, Maddie would have confirmed it, because she would have been too anxious over either being left waiting at the school when she wasn't being picked up, or over walking to her grandmother's place and then being told you're not meant to be here. So the short end of all this is basically Jenn is a complete utter liar. It was not commonplace for Maddie to head to Yolanda's. Maddie would not have thought of, oh, maybe I should go to Yolanda's. She would have gone with her normal routine because that would have been the cause of far less anxiety than taking a gamble and heading to Yolanda's.
Do you remember what Jennifer told you yesterday?
No, she's like waiting here at school, but she doesn't come out. She's not. I don't think she's here. Maybe she walked to school to the office, and I was like, okay, I'll wait here. It was 4:30, 4:35, 4:40, and she never showed up.
Okay.
So, and we went together to school, but the office were closed. It was only the after program they were open. So we went to verify to the school and the program. She didn't. While we went to the school, Jennifer called two friends that she has, and they told her that she never made it to school.
Got it.
That's when we find out everything. That she wasn't in school.
Now, here's one thing that frustrates me. I know it's early days in the interviews, of course, but you never know when a bit of information that you get in an early interview might be relevant or important later on. So, Detective Hunt has asked her what Jenn told her. And she starts talking about what Jenn says. Now, the problem I have with this is that there is no confirmation with regards to did Jenn come to the office and tell you this in person, or did Jenn ring you? And the reason I say that's important is because we've had two versions of that. In one of her interviews, Jenn says that she drove to Yolanda's office but was told it's too early, she wouldn't be here yet anyway if she was walking. And so she head out and parked on the side of the road and sat there for half an hour. But there is another source, and right now I'm really drawing a blank, but there is definitely another source, whether it is in documents or interviews, where basically it is said that Jenn rang Yolanda to ask her if Maddie was there. So Yolanda's pretty upfront. I do feel that there are points in this interview when she is trying to protect Jenn, but in terms of this part of the timeline, at this point in time, you know, there was not really any need to really protect anyone in her mind, I believe. So now would have been a really good time to really narrow in on the details. But he doesn't, so we don't have any confirmation from her, any direct confirmation with regards to whether Jenn went to the office or phoned the office. Although, like I said, my money is on Jenn driving directly to the office because it then gave her an opportunity to leave the school grounds before any staff came over to help her out over waiting for her daughter who had not come out. Because I do believe that's what was going on here. That is why she only waited 6 minutes for Maddie to come out, because she didn't want to do that act on her own. So, moving on, we get, and this seems to be pretty solid in the timeline, Yolanda says 4:30, 4:35, 4:40. Maddie had never showed up. Yolanda's use of English is interesting. I hope that if they did do any subsequent interviews with her, if perhaps the State Attorney's Office did an interview with her or anything, that I suspect quite strongly that her first language is Spanish. And I think that in cases like this, I think follow-up interviews should give these people the option of doing it in their first language. Because that way, provided that you actually use a decent interpreter, that way it makes it easier for them to convey exactly what they're trying to say. Now, so she says basically that, by 4:40, Maddie hadn't shown up. And that her and Jenn went to the school together. So this is something that Jenn actually never told any detectives. Jenn always made it out that it was always just basically her who went to the school looking for Maddie. And I do believe that the timing of it was calculated by Jenn specifically, because the school office closes at 4:30. So you have basically Jenn turning back up at Yolanda's office. I mean, Yolanda is her mother. She probably knows that this woman is a go-getter, someone who is going to jump into action immediately. So Jenn probably realised that, well, I can't turn up back there before 4:30 because otherwise then we're going to have to talk to the school office. And I think Jenn definitely was trying to delay anything happening. Don't forget, she wasn't the one who even called 911. So we have Yolanda saying, we went back to the school office, or we went together to the school office. Now, can we also acknowledge here that this occurred after 4:45? We know this for a fact because in the 911 calls we hear Letitia ask Jenn a question about Maddie, what she was wearing. And we hear Jenn saying she doesn't know. She's going to check and find out. Although later on, she's so confident when she says what Maddie was wearing. But that basically means that Jenn was there at the time, and Letitia specifically mentioned in that 911 call that Jenn and Yolanda were about to go back to the school and check. So they did not go back to the school till after 4:45. So Jenn basically orchestrated that very, very well. She would know that the office closes at 4:30. She probably wanted to make sure that there were no stragglers. So I would say she probably held back a bit with getting back to Yolanda's office. We know based on phone data that she got back around 4:35. Clearly there's been a conversation that's gone on, and then they've returned to the school after Letitia has made the 911 call. Now, what's important here is that Yolanda is basically dumping Jenn in it already. And Yolanda, in this one section of the interview, has, as far as I'm concerned, proven that there's more going on in the background with this family than what we originally suspected, and I'll come to that in half a moment. So, she's saying we went to the school, the office was closed, so we went into the after school program just to check in case maybe Maddie had gone there, like as if she would. She's probably never been there. And to verify, and she didn't go. And she says, while we went to the school, Jenn rang two of Maddie's friends, who told her that she never made it to school. That's when we found out everything. She wasn't in school. Do you see the problem with the timeline here? And I have to say, this is actually something that I originally hadn't spotted because I hadn't actually slowed down to really look at Yolanda's interview. But she's saying that basically once Jenn rang Maddie's friends, that's when they realised that Maddie hadn't been in school. That's when they realised what was going on. Okay, fine. So why did Letitia call 911 before that? In front of you, Yolanda. Because don't forget, Jenn was present in the office when Letitia called 911. So Yolanda was covering for Jenn. I very naively at the start of this case just went, oh, Jenn's family aren't going to cover for her. Yolanda didn't know anything. But this is glaring. And we know, we can confirm it with the timeline. We know the 911 call was made prior to them returning to the school. Meaning that they knew before they went to the school that Maddie had never gone to school that day. That really makes me start to look much harder at Jenn's family and much harder at Yolanda. And now, like I said, we do have to remember that Yolanda's English isn't native speaker fluent kind of English. And we do have to keep that in mind when we're listening here. But to me, there's a huge red flag in something she said. So she's talking about Jenn ringing her to Maddie's two friends who said that Maddie never made it to school. Now, I'm going to give her a free pass on saying Maddie never made it to school because we know that's what Jenn kept saying. So at this point in time, this is most likely Yolanda quoting Jenn. But then she says, that's when we found out everything. And says she wasn't in school. Well, to me, saying that's when we found out everything, that means you found out more than one thing. You found out more details. Saying she wasn't in school is one detail, that's not everything. So if we stop for just one moment and examine the relationship between Yolanda and Jenn. Yolanda is definitely the matriarch in that family. She calls the shots. She's definitely the one in control. I have no doubt about that whatsoever. And of course, over the years, she has allowed Jenn to move back into her place at various times in between Jenn's relationships with Stefan. And while I'm not going to give out address details, a little bit of research will show you that despite claims from other creators who have come across photos of Jen's car at Natalie's place from 12 months ago, if not longer, and are claiming that, not Natalie's place, Stephanie's place, and are claiming that Jenn is hiding out at Stephanie's place. A little bit of research will show you that actually Jenn is currently, or appears to currently be living with Yolanda, meaning that Yolanda is still sheltering Jenn despite everything that occurred. So we have a woman who is a matriarch, a woman who is a businesswoman, so clearly a strong personality, and a woman who will still shelter her daughter no matter what. So when she says that's when we found out everything, I can't help wondering, especially given that during those body cam interviews, Yolanda, okay, she was at one stage hugging Stephanie, but she was kind of keeping her distance. I know a lot of the family were, but she was keeping her distance. And I wonder if this was not so much about keeping her distance from Jenn and Stefan, but more about keeping her distance from the officers because she didn't want to have to say what she knew. When she says, that's when we found out everything, I wonder if basically she pulled Jenn into line and said, right, tell me now what's going on. Or if it is just that sort of thing in that family where Jenn basically coughed up the facts after heading to the school. Speculation, of course, and of course it is dependent on our theory that Jenn knew, but just something to keep in mind.
Did she tell you who took her to school yesterday?
I know Stefan, yes.
Okay.
Came here to, I don't even know, I guess for...
Gotcha.
Okay, the question, do you know who took Maddie to school yesterday morning? Straight up the answer is Stefan. Now, you don't hear any segues here as to anything that shows her opinion of Stefan. Anything that shows her understanding that it's not normal for Stefan to take Maddie to school. She's just straight out, Stefan took Maddie to school. No editorialising at all. Now maybe that's just how she is responding with this interview, because this is a woman who basically works in insurance, so she probably is a no-nonsense kind of person. But we didn't even hear any kind of venom in her voice that would suggest that, you know, she has an issue with Stefan supposedly taking Maddie to school. Which I find really, really interesting. Why was it such a matter-of-fact thing, given her dislike of Stefan, given that Stefan wasn't invited to Maddie's birthday, given that apparently when Stefan went there for Christmas, he didn't join in with the Christmas stuff because the family didn't want him around. But she does offer up that she believes Stefan went there for Maddie's birthday. I know that bit because it is actually something that Detective Hunt wrote in his report. So the bit that's redacted out was Yolanda saying that she thinks the reason Stefan was there was because of Maddie's birthday. This, of course, doesn't align with Jen's story of Jenn wanting Stefan there to help her with Maddie and to help her with the dog. But given that Jenn said to detectives that if Maddie was to stay with Yolanda, or if she were to get help with Stephanie getting Maddie to and from school, that she wouldn't get to see Maddie as much. I'd imagine that Jenn wouldn't have mentioned that to her family, especially given that it appears that Juan was around at the time visiting, because we know that he was at Stephanie's place when the detectives went, or the officers went there on the Monday night. So he had to have been somewhere nearby. Either he was within driving range, within a 6-hour driving range, and drove back, or he was already back from wherever he was travelling to. Either way, it would have been the easiest option for him to pick up Maddie from school, pick up Maddie from home and drive her to school, and vice versa. So I can understand why Jenn would not have told Yolanda her reason for Stefan being there, because it certainly would have caused a somewhat awkward situation. Oh yeah, by the way, Mum, Steph is coming up for the week, because I don't want Maddie to stay with you during the week. I mean, face it, even as adults, we just don't want to upset or offend our parents, do we?
Okay, so does he live there with them still, or?
No.
No. Gotcha. He just came. Does he?
I guess he just came to visit.
Got it.
So there's one of two things going on here. Either Yolanda really doesn't give a rat's ass about what Jenn does with her life, or she's basically closing ranks and isn't going to tell Detective Hunt anything other than straight out facts. So let me explain. He asks her, so he doesn't live here anymore? And she's like, no. And I think Detective Frank was waiting for more of a response, because you get this pause and then she says, I guess he just came to visit. And she's so chipper about it, which to me just sounds out of place, because Yolanda hates Stefan for starters. But not only that, she knew that he had moved out at the beginning of December. And yet she's saying it so very matter-of-factly, like he comes up visiting every other weekend. Now, from what we've told, or from what we've been told, after Christmas he hadn't had a lot of visits. But not only that, we know that Jenn wasn't actually telling the flatmates when Stefan was coming to visit. So I strongly suspect that she also wasn't telling any of her family when Stefan was coming to visit, because she knew that they disapproved of him. But there's no indication here from Yolanda that she was surprised. No, I'm not sure why he was here. None of the normal reactions that I would have expected to hear from her. Instead, it's just, I guess he just came to visit. And it baffles me. Is it just that to her, Jenn is just such a complete, utter screw up that she no longer judges anything that Jenn does? And so even though she disapproves of Stefan, there's no point in really reacting to the fact that he was there, because she just accepts that's just the way Jenn is. She's not going to change it. Why worry about it herself? Or, like I said, is it closing ranks? She doesn't want to express her thoughts or opinions about Stefan being there that weekend to this officer because she wants to protect her family. Even though, honestly, Jenn really does not deserve any kind of protection, in my opinion. I mean, when you think about it, we go back to Natalie's interview and her reaction to Stefan being there was apparently, what the F is he doing here? And yet we don't get that from Yolanda. We don't even get any indication in the tone of her voice that she doesn't like him. And I'm thinking that she sounds a little bit too chipper. So is she actually overdoing the attempt at being nonchalant over him being there on that weekend because she doesn't want to cue to the detective that it's a red flag to her?
When did
I'm not sure, but I know he moved back in December to Punta Gorda.
Mhm.
He moved out of the house.
Okay. And it, as far as you know, it's because they
As far as I know, I don't know.
got it.
So again, he's asked her when did Stefan get there, and she doesn't know. So she should have actually sounded surprised about Stefan being there, not nonchalant. To me, that definitely confirms that she's basically putting on a bit of a front here. And then it's really interesting that she says, well, he moved back in December to Punta Gorda. Well, each time I heard her say that, I thought maybe that was just, adjacent to Northport and she was just, not familiar with the geography and just kind of was thinking Northport and Punta Gorda were like, one and the same. But it's actually 20 minutes south of Northport, adjacent to Port Charlotte. Now, we know that Stefan and Jenn lived in Port Charlotte for a while, so it's not like she's going to confuse that with Port Charlotte. So why the belief that that's where he went to? Did they lie to her about him having some fancy job? Or was Jenn lying to her because she knew that Yolanda just didn't like Stefan, so instead of saying that his parents lived at Northport, said that they lived at Punta Gorda? Because it sounds like, and if you are from Florida, help me out here, but from just a quick look online, it sounds like Punta Gorda is more of an upmarket kind of area. Correct me if I'm wrong. So, whose deception is this? Is this Yolanda saying that because she doesn't want to admit that her daughter was basically living with a complete utter loser? Was it Jenn telling Yolanda that to try and sound impressive? What is going on? Why does she believe that that's where he moved back to? And of course she says here to the detective that she doesn't know why he moved out and moved down there. So my question is, did they not communicate to Maddie over why Stefan moved out? Because I would imagine that with Maddie periodically staying at Yolanda's place, that she probably would have mentioned something to Yolanda about the reason for Stefan moving out if she knew. Because as much as we hate to say it, Stefan had basically made Maddie dependent on him. It was that a typical relationship that we so often see with people such as Stearns, where he has love bombed her, groomed her, made her think that to him she is the most important person in the world. And who doesn't want to have someone who believes that they are the best person in the world? You can understand why for a child like Maddie, who is invisible to so many others, that connection would have felt important. So while I can imagine Jenn perhaps not telling Yolanda why Stefan moved out, on the flip side of that, I would expect that Maddie would have discussed it with Yolanda. And I also suspect that Maddie would have asked for questions with regards to why Stefan was moving out. So, to me, I think that Yolanda probably did know some version or other of why Stefan moved out.
Okay, well, I guess that makes sense. But he came back this weekend, maybe
came
for
back
her.
just- I
For
can-
it. I guess, is it common of Stefan?
I guess sometimes he did.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Got it. And did he say where he dropped her off at all?
He said he dropped her off in the corner of Urbana. There is a building there. It's called Urbana.
Bana?
Urbana.
Urbana.
Urbana. It's town loop, and I don't even know the name of the street.
Okay. By
I
Urbana.
was right in the corner.
Got it. So he dropped her off there, and then did he say what happened after?
He said that he just walked, like going to school,
Mhm.
and then she stopped for a few seconds. I guess she was looking for her phone,
Yeah.
and then he just kept going.
Okay.
So, based on Detective Hunt's report, Yolanda told him that she believed Stefan must have come back for Maddie's birthday. Now, I think there was a bit more than that said, so I don't know if she's saying, like, that maybe they were going to have a celebration or something, I don't know. But according to his report, that's what she believed in terms of the reasoning for Stefan to come back. And he asks, is it common for Stefan to drop Maddie off at school? Now, we know from Maddie's best friend and from Angelica that Stefan has never dropped Maddie off at school. But Yolanda says, I guess sometimes he does. She probably would have been better off saying, I don't know. Because when I hear someone say, I guess sometimes he does, to me that's more a case of, I really have no idea. I'm basing this opinion on the fact that he took her that day. So I guess that means that sometimes he does take her to school. But here's what I find interesting about that. We heard that audio where Natalie spoke to one of the officers and said she thought it was really weird because Stefan never takes Maddie to school. Natalie is Stephanie's best friend. So you can't tell me that after Maddie went missing that Natalie didn't say to Stephanie, well, it's really odd because I know he's never taken Maddie to school before. Why did he take her that day? why wouldn't Stephanie then convey that to Yolanda? Maybe they don't tell Yolanda some things because they know she disapproves and they're trying to avoid causing issues for Jenn. But it just fascinates me that you have Natalie on one hand approaching one of the officers and saying it's weird because he never takes her to school, and Yolanda essentially admitting she doesn't know, but saying, well, I guess sometimes he does, based on the fact that he had that morning. And again, the question is this to avoid putting the spotlight on Jenn, or does she really not know? But it seems like she's been given a different version of Stearns' story in terms of where he dropped Maddie off. Either that, or him being so vague with his story and her being so familiar with the area, she may have basically translated what he was saying and come up with her notion of where he dropped Maddie off. Because she says that he dropped her off on the corner of Urbana and talks about it being near Town Loop. It's possible, though, that... Remember the first interview? And the officer asked Jenn, could Maddie's laptop be traced? And she said no. And I think it was probably Letitia said, yes, it can if it's turned on. Is it possible that in telling the original version of the story, where Maddie was dropped off on the corner somewhere, that perhaps one of the family members may have said, well, that's good because there should be cameras there that'll show where she went. Because it seems like there were a lot of cameras on corners in the area there. So maybe this was the original story that Stefan told. And then someone was like, oh, well, that's good, those cameras will be able to see. And then he changed his story to somewhere along the block, somewhere along the road. Because remember, in his interview, he specifically says to, I think this was in Detective Tagler's interview, he specifically said it wasn't near a corner or anything. So I'm wondering if the original lie was what he's told Yolanda. And then someone has mentioned cameras and he's then changed it for the later interviews with detectives. Now, she also says Maddie walked off, and then she stopped for a few seconds, was looking for something in her bag, and at that point in time Stefan kept going. So that is also different from Stefan's version that he told detectives of how Maddie was, what was the word he used, shambling along looking in her bag, giving the impression that she was still essentially moving along. So the story has changed there also. It could, of course, be that Yolanda's interpretation has just been different. Doesn't necessarily mean that he told her different. It could just be that she's interpreted it differently. But it is interesting that we have, in this version of events, Maddie being dropped off on a corner and her actually stopping to look in her bag rather than shambling off looking in her bag.
Run away before, or ever wanted to go somewhere else or hang out with her friends without permission or anything?
No, not that I know.
Okay. Is there anywhere you know of that she likes to hang out or go to clear her head if she's ever upset, or a place that she likes to go?
One day she was upset. I guess she had a fight. And she called me crying. And I was like, I'm walking around the neighborhood. I was like, why are you doing that? She's like, I don't want to be in my house right now because I am mad. I was like, you know what? Go back to the house. Don't walk alone in the street. And she said, okay. So she went back. That's the only thing I knew. It happens. That was, I think, like a year ago. That happened like a year ago.
There is a major missed opportunity there. So, before I talk about that, he's asked her if Maddie has places that she likes to go. Remember Jen's claimed that Maddie used to go out to like a jetty or something out on the lake, which was apparently within view of the townhouse, and Jenn would periodically check on her. Well, apparently Yolanda never got that memo, and you would think that, being her granddaughter, that she would be aware of such things as that. So again, I think that either that was a one-off thing that may have occurred, and Jen's just said that as a, look at me, I'm a good mother. Even when she's upset, I go and check on her. What we get from Yolanda is this description of this incident from about a year earlier, where Maddie Maddie was upset and she rang up Yolanda. And Yolanda said, don't walk around the neighbourhood, it's not safe, go back home. So Yolanda has explained this as, I think she had a fight with Jenn, and says that she knew that Maddie was mad with Jenn, which is why she thinks she had a fight. So to me that says that she's completely dismissed Maddie in this situation. Now obviously if there was a fight between her and Jenn, then it's not her place to intervene in that. Not her place to take sides or become involved. However, Maddie at that point in time would have only been 11 or barely 12. It's a young child. And she was upset enough to ring her grandmother. Upset enough to have exited the house, been wandering around the neighbourhood, and expressly said to her grandmother, I don't want to go back to the house. Yolanda dismissed all of that and gave her marching orders. Don't wander around the neighbourhood, it's not safe, go back to the house. Okay, well and good, like I said. Not her argument to be involved in. Not her place to intervene between Maddie and Jenn. However, that was a huge opening right there. And we know that Maddie would occasionally stay at Yolanda's on the weekends. We know that there was clearly no further discussion about this because Yolanda has just gone with the presumption that they must have had a fight. So instead of the next time that Maddie was at her house, staying, broaching the subject and just trying to essentially make sure that everything was all good with Maddie, it just got forgotten and dismissed. You know, there's ways of getting children to talk without feeling like you are interfering or prying. you don't have to directly ask them to dob in a parent and say, you know, my parent's a horrible person because they do this. But, you know, this is Maddie's grandmother. How hard could it have been to have a simple conversation of, when you rang me during the week, you were upset with your mother, is everything okay now? That's a good opening. That is not asking for any details. It's not asking anything other than essentially asking the child if they are okay. And of course, if you have that position of trust, which presumably Yolanda did, given that she was the one that Maddie rang, something like that may be enough of an opener. So he's gone nuts. Something like that may be more than enough of an opener for her to decide to discuss what's going on. But regardless of that, the point I'm making here is that Maddie was having a really, really bad day when she rang Yolanda that time. She didn't want to go back to the house. Yolanda dismissed it with, don't wander the streets, go back home. Now, you dismiss a child in a way like that, you bet they're not going to bring up that topic again, because in their mind they've been dismissed. So it's up to you to broach the topic and show that actually you are concerned and you do want to listen now that the crisis is over, and it means that you are not actually interfering with, you know, relationships between mother and daughter. But no, Yolanda dismissed Maddie here. She didn't want to know. Just told her to go back home. And I'm thinking that's probably the pattern, because we hear about that again quite soon in this interview.
Okay.
And then after that, I don't know.
Got it. Okay.
Hang on. I actually stopped in the wrong spot, didn't I? Because she's basically admitted here she didn't even check at the time to make sure Maddie had headed off back home. After that, I don't know. I mean, obviously Maddie did head home at one point in time. But, I'm sorry, you just said to your 11-year-old, or possibly newly 12-year-old granddaughter, don't wander the neighbourhood, it's unsafe, go home. And you never thought to follow up to make sure that she did?
Do you have any concerns with... I just ask this because I have to. Do you have any concerns about either Jennifer or Stefan with ever raised alarm with you that you can remember?
I never liked him. Don't ask me why, because I don't even know myself. It's because I guess he doesn't work, he doesn't do anything. I mean, he's just there because he suffers from a lot of things.
Okay.
And I mean, he doesn't do anything, he doesn't work, he doesn't help you. Something that, you know, it's not my life, but I just ask her, you know. That was her answer.
Got it.
So, up until this point in the interview, Yolanda has been quite frugal with her answers. She's basically given almost yes and no answers. Very, very brief. But then we get the question, did you have any concerns with Jenn or Stefan? Was there anything that ever raised alarms with you? So we're talking concerns, things that raised alarms, red flags. And immediately she goes to, well, I never liked him. And then she really goes to town. He wasn't working, he doesn't do anything, he was just there because he suffered from a lot of things. Well, okay, he did, apparently. And then she has to double down on that. So she again offers up, he doesn't do anything, he doesn't work, he doesn't help. Well, okay. But how is that something that relates to the question of, is there anything that has ever raised alarms? I think either that big long redacted bit could have been her mentioning about the three of them sharing a bed, or maybe her saying those things is essentially her way of saying that she just had this gut instinct that something wasn't right with him. But she certainly suddenly had a lot to say with this question. She didn't give anything specific that you would say, well, yeah, that would raise alarm. But the fact that she has had to basically go over the top with the convincing of essentially he's just a big waste of space, he's a loser, I don't like him, makes me think that she probably did have some major concerns over him and maybe did see red flags.
So typically, does he text you or anything from the phone?
No,
Not much?
not much.
So I think if we can work around the redactions, he asked her, typically, does Maddie text you much on the phone? And she says, no, not much. How ironic is that when we know that apparently, according to Maddie's best friends, Maddie was always on the phone with Stefan. Maddie was always messaging Stefan. Maddie and Jenn were always face-chatting Stefan, or FaceTiming Stefan. Just makes for an interesting comparison when you look at that alongside Yolanda saying, no, she doesn't really text me that much.
Remember the last time you spoke with her before Sunday?
Well, I spoke to her Friday, because she slept over at my house.
Okay.
And then Saturday, I came here to work, and after here, I was going to the party.
Gotcha.
And I told my husband I was going to take her, and she started crying. She said no, she doesn't want to go. So she didn't go at all. So my ex-husband went to pick her up.
Okay.
And they spent the day together.
This has got to be perhaps one of the most heartbreaking things about this entire case. It is not normal behaviour for a child to be crying and saying they do not want to go home. That is not something to do with a child who has arguments with their mother. That is something way bigger. Nobody ever listened to Maddie. Sure, she arranged to have Juan pick up Maddie and spend the day with her. And, that gives Juan a precious memory. His last precious memory with his granddaughter. Just that one-on-one thing. But so dismissive. I'm a bit frustrated here that Detective Hunt didn't actually ask if Yolanda asked Maddie why she didn't want to go home. But honestly, it just, huge red flag. The child is crying and does not want to go home. And all you do is a bit of a band-aid. Oh well, we won't send her home just yet. She can spend time with her grandfather. But presumably she was taken home after that. I mean, we know that at the very least, Maddie had stayed overnight with Yolanda. So, even if her and Jenn had a fight on the Friday, perhaps, there had been cool-down time. So what was really going on? Why was Maddie so distraught that she didn't even want to go home? And why did not one of those adults around her give a damn? Did they even ask her, why don't you want to go home? And, I can understand that it would have to be so painful for a grandparent to lose a grandchild. It's not something you would never, ever get over. I mean, I can remember way back when my dad passed away, and my nan was devastated, and she was saying no parent should have to bury their own child. So, add another generation to that, and, no grandparent should have to bury their own grandchild. And, I recognise that it must have been, and still is, a torture for her to know these things that happened to Maddie. And I know that in situations like this, the advice is forget about the what ifs. You can't change those. But I just hope, and this may sound horrible, but I hope that she has regrets. Because, like everybody else around Maddie, she ignored Maddie's needs. She didn't hear Maddie. And I wonder if the reason that she didn't really pay attention to Maddie's concerns was because of her relationship with Jenn. We know they didn't have a perfect relationship. So, did Yolanda in her head just dismiss all this as, well, Jenn would be a pretty horrible person to live with, so yeah, Maddie's just, reacting because that's what Jenn's like. And she didn't actually stop to consider that actually this is still not normal. I mean, at the end of the day, she knew about the co-sleeping arrangements. And she's relayed 2 separate instances here where Maddie has been in tears and said she did not want to go home. And we're talking about 2 instances 12 months apart. This is not just this was a really bad week. this is a long-term thing. And what does she do? Absolutely nothing.
Do you
Saturday.
ever pick her up from school, or does your ex-husband ever pick her up from school?
Yeah. I don't know about my ex-husband, but when I have to, I'll go and pick her up. If not, Leticia.
And when you pick her up, where do you pick her up
Just
from?
from the school.
From the school.
Yeah, from
Have you ever picked her up from like anywhere else far from the school?
Church. Like
Church.
Of course, yeah, like from the church.
Is that somewhere that she hangs out, or other kids
No,
hang out, or?
no. There's a lot of kids there at that time.
Oh, they kind of go there.
Yeah, a lot of kids go there. Their parents will pick them up from the church.
Got it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So she says that either her or Letitia will pick up Maddie from school occasionally. And then she talks about occasionally picking her up from the church. Essentially, it sounds like it's the alternate pickup for people who don't want to wait in the car line. And, I mean, let's be real, if Yolanda is working full-time, then she's not going to have an hour and a half to sit in the car line like Jenn. But it's clearly not an issue for her to pick Maddie up from school, directly from the school, because that seems to be the main thing. The church sounds like it's just an occasional thing. So why was it so important for Jenn to be front of the line to pick Maddie up? Because I'd imagine, given, like I said, because Yolanda works full-time, given time constraints, if that car line was as vicious as what Jenn would like people to believe, then Yolanda would pick Maddie up at the church all the time rather than at the car line, because it would save time for her and allow her to get back to work. So that actually, to me, shows Jenn as, once again, being somewhat deceptive. And why the heck has nobody asked, or have no detective asked anybody else if it's normal for Jenn to sit in the car line for an hour and a half? If it's normal for Jenn to be at the front of the car line? I mean, surely someone would know. Well, I mean, actually, Angelica would know. Because Angelica leaves to go to work after Jenn has gone to pick up Maddie. Supposedly. If Angelica leaves at 3:40, then given that it's supposed to be, 20 minutes from the townhouse to Maddie's school, then you would think that even if Jenn was going for the back of the car line, that she still would have left before Angelica. But we've not had anybody asked, is it normal for Jenn to try and be front of the line? And as for security footage from the school, well, from the week before, given that Maddie was staying with Yolanda, they wouldn't have security footage that goes back far enough to show whether or not that was a pattern with Jenn. Just frustrates me so much, the things that didn't get asked in this case. And I guess they can't be blamed because at this point in time they haven't done as many interviews with Jenn, so they're probably not aware of how deceptive how she was being, how she was lying, how she was changing her story, all that sort of thing. But even still, it's so frustrating.
Got it. Okay. What's a good phone number for you? Have your ID so I can get your name down?
I have it in my
Oh, that's fine. How do you spell your name?
Yolanda.
And your last name?
Zambrano. Z as in zebra. AMBRANO.
And what's your birthday?
9/29/67.
And you do have a Florida ID. I can
Yes.
look up with that. Okay, cool. Gotcha. Okay. Well, is there anything else important that you think I should know?
Yeah, my brother-in-law. He woke up this morning. He went to look at the trail, and he was walking, and he passed by 417 under, and he found the wallet. I have it.
When
here.
you say the trail, what trail?
It's like in the back of the school. There is a trail.
Oh, there's a trail behind the
Yes,
school.
Behind the school. Yeah.
Okay, and you found a wallet. Yeah, I'll take a look at it.
And
Let's
if
take
you want
a-
to come in and
Yeah.
take a look what he found, and he just gave it to me, and I
1319.
found 20.
And then the recording just cuts off instead of just coming to a satisfying end. I just find it ironic, that little bit of conversation at the end, that her brother-in-law went out searching that morning. Coupled that with the best friend's father, got home from work, went out searching till 9 o'clock on the day that Maddie went missing. All these people that aren't directly related to Maddie. And yet, what were Jenn and Stefan doing? Sitting on their asses. No, sorry. I did Jenn an injustice, didn't I? She looked by driving from the school to her mother's office, and then leaving her mother's office again, driving part way along the route that Maddie would walk, and parking on the side of the road for half an hour. Because, that's how most parents are going to look for their missing child. Those people disappoint me so much. So that brings us to the end of Yolanda's interview. Tomorrow I will tackle Juan and Stephanie's interview. They were both spoken to together, if you remember. I had hoped to get a second one done today, but I'm not really certain if that's going to happen now. So on that note, that brings us to the end. So if you are new to my channel, please subscribe. Please hit the like button, and please do leave a comment below. I look forward to reading your comments. I do read everyone's comments. I just don't quite manage to respond to everyone's comments. It's a time thing. I do my best. There's only so many hours in the day, and I do like to have time to myself when I'm not actually attending to my YouTube channel. So on that note, thanks for listening, and I will catch you in the next one.
I've been